Hi, folks. Welcome to this special Zoogla community meetup with Joyce Zhang. I had the opportunity to meet her during a StartX dinner I hosted in San Francisco. For those who don't know what StartX is, it's a accelerator right next to Stanford University. It actually sits on Stanford's ground in Stanford Research Park. That's mainly for folks that attended Stanford, although if you have a connection to someone who attended it, and through StartX, they can actually get you into the accelerator as well. And just a couple of times I've been able to chat with her. One knew that Joyce could be really helpful to the Zoogla community, but also everyone else during this time. And I will save why I thought so for the introduction that Joyce would give, but wanted to run a fireside chat with Joyce. Joyce, thanks for giving us some of your day today to share more about what you do, but also your background and what your company does and how all of us could learn more about this new future of work that we're in. Joyce, would you mind giving a personal background first to kick things off?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you everyone for inviting me to be here and for tuning in from all over the country and the world. So my name is Joyce, as Chris said, and my background is that I actually studied international relations and economics when I was in college. And I started my career with the Federal Reserve during the financial crisis. So I know a thing or two about market downturns, and a very large number of my classmates, I remember, were quite shocked because, they had, for example, an offer and they'd interned with this little firm called Lehman Brothers back in the day, and then they found themselves suddenly graduating unemployed. So we began our careers in a very interesting market, and I would say that it made all of us much more resilient and also, I think, very expansive in our thinking about what careers and jobs look like. So fast forward, I ended up later on working in tech. I went to grad school for public policy, which is one of my key passions, as well as business. And Alariss came from kind of a lot of personal experiences and a lot of personal observations. So a couple of things. One is that I was being recruited by a lot of companies to launch in other markets. And for those of you who've ever been in that role before, you can probably understand what it is. I know that Nicole here is with DoorDash. DoorDash has also been very famous for kind of pioneering that launch and land and expand model. So that usually means you have a local sales, marketing, customer support team in another country, and you launch and trying to expand a customer base in those markets. So I was helping a lot of American tech companies launch overseas, and I realized this is really tough. And not only is it tough, it's extra tough because I'm an American. I was born and raised here. Yes, I speak other languages, luckily, from, having parents who are immigrants and from studying foreign languages in schools, but just speaking another language doesn't make you qualified necessarily to work in those countries in that effective way. So it really requires local knowledge and empathy with the customer and having someone who's really located there. So that was one observation. The other was the observation that actually the emerging markets, in particular Asia, Latin America, Africa, there was so much growth, there was so much acceleration, and a lot of things were happening. And not only were they growing in their regional markets, but many of these companies located in these markets wanted to tap into the US or, kind of Western economies and come here. And so I sort of combined those observations and some of my experiences, in addition to the fact that many of my friends who are founders and executives in those countries kept on asking me for help with, again, local domain knowledge, especially how to hire and build local teams. And I thought this would be a really interesting opportunity for a platform that would help connect the two sides, because actually this is true the world over. The most valuable resource and the one that's missing in every company of any size is human capital. And I know it's easier said than done sometimes, because I know from the job seeker side, it can feel frustrating. Like, where are the right jobs? Why is no one hiring? But on the side of the hiring manager, it's actually even more challenging because they feel like they can never find the appropriate talent when they need it at the budget they can afford. And companies are actually becoming smaller and smaller all around the world. This is a trend that we're seeing, but there are more companies. So there are more people and there are more companies, and each company is smaller. And so, as you can imagine, most of these companies don't have the massive and amazing reach that companies like Google had appreciated. But that doesn't mean these millions of companies around the world aren't worth working for. As a matter of fact, many of them provide probably just as good, if not even better, career and growth opportunities and training opportunities for the right person. But they just have no way of connecting with people. And conversely, one of the things that we realized is there's this trend in what we call the future of work, in which great talent wants to be able to kind of structure their day in a certain way or have the flexibility to do certain things, or perhaps even mentally and intellectually challenge themselves to work on different projects and not just on one very, very niche project for a long time. And coupled with that, we were hearing from the market that there was increasing, there was on both sides of the market. Employers were sometimes less able to offer a long-term career path for employees. And employees were in turn interested in having a portfolio of different jobs and opportunities, both again to keep intellectually stimulated, perhaps to have different flows of cash and income, but also because sometimes they just didn't have that same feeling of loyalty of this is a company that my grandparents and parents worked with, and they have a pension and it takes care of them in their retirement. That relationship between employer and employee was fundamentally changing. And so I think that's where technology and also thinking very globally about one's earning potential and one's impact potential became really important. So that's part of why I started Alariss. I'm glad that Chris invited me. I hope to be able to help all of you in different ways and in similar ways through either our platform or through my personal network. So thank you again for being on this call.
Thank you, Joyce. I think for most people here, Americans, Pete's thankfully joining from Europe, so we get some more international flair. Can you share more about what are international companies looking for in Americans and the connection, and what's special about everyone? Every race and nation is special, but clearly we're on this topic talking about folks hiring American talent. Can you share more about what they're looking for in terms of the experience working in a large American tech company that they need?
Yes, definitely. Well, every, I would say that every company anywhere in the world really has certain dreams and ambitions, and especially for startups. I'm wearing this Google for Startups sweater that I got from a talk that I given earlier. And what struck me, and this is startups all over the world, what struck me is a couple of things. One is entrepreneurship is difficult, and it's not just for small companies, big companies too. Running a company is difficult, but there are certain benchmarks, there are certain aspirational points that everyone wants to aim towards. And I think the concept of the American dream is really alive and well. And I would argue it's much stronger outside the US sometimes than it is internally. And it's not about being American per se. It's about what the United States symbolizes. It symbolizes a melting pot of diversity, of talent, of the best companies, the best and easiest place to do business, to list, to go public. When you start to talk to some of these companies, you start to realize that the US it is really special. And there are things about the ease of setting up, for example, even a Delaware C Corp that would be so challenging if you were in certain countries in other parts of the world. So I think there is so much that companies feel like they could learn from being in this market and from tapping into the talent, and specifically why talent that's based in the US and specifically talent that has been trained at the leading companies in the world. And I would say all Google alumni have that benefit of having been trained at one of the hands down, what is seen as one of the top companies in the entire world. Companies see this as something that brings domain expertise, that brings sort of connections, that also lends them credibility. For them to be able to even say, we have someone who's working with us who used to be at Google, like that is a huge validation for many companies as they continue to attract and retain other talent, because that other talent needs to be drawn in by the talent that they're able to bring in too. So I think there are so many reasons companies are excited about the US, and in particular, those who have either domain expertise or even just alumni, I guess, status with some of the companies that they really admire and look up to.
Great. You've double click into that. What do they admire about these companies, specifically about the culture, about perhaps the way they've been able to expand and grow rapidly?
Yes. Well, one of the interesting things that I found as well is that brand equity matters a whole ton. And as a startup founder, I find that I am constantly struggling with this myself because, for Alariss, we're always having to set out content marketing. We have to have, our own kind of partnerships. We have to brand ourselves. We need to educate people about who we are and what we do. That's not necessarily the same with other brands. And you think of those leading global brands like a Google or a Nike or, an Apple, whatever it might be. I think a lot of times people from the outside looking in, they don't even know anything about the internal culture or what's happened or anything like that. It's not even as granular. It's really on a high level. They just admire it because they've heard of it, and they've heard of it because the brand has done a really good job of being successful and having sort of, effectively evangelized. It's another form almost of American soft power, if you think of it that way. Google and many other companies have kind of led to this phenomenon of people feeling like if you come to this country, if you have talent from here, you can do anything. The sky's the limit, because some of the most successful companies, some of the most successful people we've ever encountered or heard about came from them. But it's nothing as granular as knowing about the culture, even how hiring practices work, or how many employees there are, or what food's in the micro kitchens. It's oftentimes just really broadly, it's that feeling that one gets when they see something that they really admire. It's almost like a castle on a hill, and they just think it's really cool, but they don't necessarily know why. They just really want to someday be able to, be associated with that castle.
And you brought up something which I want to double click on again, talking about how you project yourself and whether it's your startup, you project it, your own background. What advice do you have for this audience of how should they think about their LinkedIn profile and projecting themselves, and any tips you have?
Definitely. Well, one thing that I want to assure everyone is that everyone, meaning hiring managers, know that there have been a lot of layoffs. There's been a lot of just different people who are extremely talented, extremely hardworking, who have been impacted not because of performance, but because companies change. Like, this whole wave of generative AI has completely and fundamentally changed the way that we work. And especially tech companies are early adopters of everything. So whether it's early adopters of new technologies or new structures or new organizational charts, they're the first to experiment and try these things out. So I I know that one hesitation when I sometimes talk to people about posting publicly online that they've either been impacted or that they're looking for a job is, what's that perception going to look like? Are people going to judge me? It's shameful, it's embarrassing. And I hope that people can know, again, from the perspective of hiring managers and recruiters, they would just love nothing more than to be able to, hire or even have someone from Google alumni interview for their roles or their companies. Like, the vast majority of companies out there, it's a sourcing problem. Google is one of the very few companies where they have a filtering problem. There are so many people who want to work at Google, and there are so few jobs that it's really just a filter criteria. But the other millions of companies out there that are not Google, whose names you don't even know, like, you didn't know the name Alariss until you saw that I was coming to speak today. And if you didn't know Chris, you might not have known what Key did, even though it's also an awesome company. There are millions, if not tens of millions of companies around the world that are just yearning for a chance to get in front of you. And so if you're able to signal to them that you're interested and available, that actually reduce the friction for them to reach out to you. And on top of that, I know LinkedIn has changed its algorithm a lot, so don't just rely on LinkedIn. But more importantly, LinkedIn is a proxy for your network. Network-based job search, especially at your levels, having worked at Google for so many years, is usually the key to getting jobs. And so just leveraging your network, letting people know that you're open to roles, what you're looking for, the more you let them know, the more they can help you. If you don't communicate to them what you're looking for, then they don't know to help you. And for example, Nathan was saying he's looking to become, or well, I know it's being recorded, so I guess I can mention it another time. You mentioned it earlier, but he was looking at potential things and like just letting us know, and we said, okay, cool, that's great. Now we know, and we'll be on the lookout for it. So just tactically on LinkedIn, you can write a post. I've seen a lot of really authentic, very authentic posts that get a lot of organic reach, where people just talk very openly about what happened to them, what they're looking for. Of course, usually you want to set the right tone of being really gracious and thanking your previous team and managers for all the things that you learned. I see those posts do better. I don't think the posts where people come across as like, angry and bitter come across as well, unfortunately. I don't know. I think LinkedIn's algorithm likes to optimize for happy things. So things that are like gracious, self-reflective, but letting people know that, hey, you're on the market, this happened to you, and you're like looking forward to your next adventure. Those things work really well if you're comfortable with it. If you're not, totally fine. There are ways even on LinkedIn that you can privately signal to recruiters that you're open to work, and it won't put that little logo around your picture. And then there are other ways of just having conversations. Activate your network. Again, think of people that you know who are either in positions or in companies that you admire or think are interesting, and get like, grab lunch with them, get coffee, just reactivate your network. You probably will be surprised at the results. And sometimes it's not the first order person, but their friends or their friends of friends. And then, of course, encouraging people to amplify. So if you do post something online or send it to people, then it's very easy for them to like, reshare, repost, and all of those things. And you want to keep an open mind, because again, a lot of the opportunities that are the best for people are maybe not the ones that have that huge brand attached to it. Because I think if I were to really ask people, like, how many companies can you name? I'm sure the average American could probably only name about 20 companies that they can think of off the top of their head that they like think they want to work for. And again, just in the US alone, there are 100 million small businesses technically listed under, by definition, of the Small Business Association. And of course, some people in the US have like, it's a mom and pop shop. So by definition, it's a two-person small business. They're not looking to hire. So it's not like your TAM is 100 million, but it's definitely more than 10 or 20 companies. So you can also think really expansively. And the last thing I would say is like, know, or on this subject at least, is to know yourself. Understand what your objectives are. This is an amazing opportunity for you to really think critically about what matters to you and what you want out of your next role and out of your career. Are you optimizing for flexibility, for learning, for colleagues, for office amenities, for, distance from work, commute time, for career growth, for title? Like, these are all things that you can stack rank. You might not get all of them at once, but you'll likely be able to optimize for at least some of them. And so, for example, some people really care about their title. So they're willing to take a pay cut for a higher title. And many companies do this. They'll almost over title people because they can get really great people in for lower salaries because of the title. I know it might sound silly for those who said, well, I don't care about title. I care more about, the compensation, the benefits, but different people have different preferences. So just understand your own preferences and also your own timeline. If you're, I know this probably doesn't pertain to most of you, but if you're running up against, for example, visa issues, you're laid off, you have a ticking time in which, you need to get a new job and a visa sponsor, otherwise you get deported, then don't be picky about your next role. Just any company that offers you visa sponsorship will do. If you're the sole breadwinner of your family and you need to make rent payments, again, don't be picky about the role. Like, things will happen, even though you might have to take a role in the interest of time that is not quite at the level or salary that you deserve. If you perform well, you can get promoted. You can always get another role afterwards. Recruiters no longer look negatively upon people who job switch. Obviously, you don't want to be someone who has a resume where you job switched every single year for the last 10 or so years, but most of you were in the same company for many, many years. And so I think anyone would look at your profiles and say, this person is stable, they're loyal, they're hardworking, they've gotten promoted consistently. So even if you land in a job right away for the interest of, again, expedience, that isn't your perfect dream job. If you leave after a little bit, again, people will look more at the entire history rather than just at what happened in the last role.
Cool, thank you. So I saw this link on your website, and I want to share more about what folks should really say on a LinkedIn or an application like this, say unique and interesting to employers. I'm sure you evaluate a lot of candidates that come through your portal, right, Joyce? How do we assess what's interesting that we think is interesting versus what an employer might think is interesting?
That's a great question. I wish LinkedIn let you do like different landing pages. Like, how websites, you can do different landing pages. Like, LinkedIn just gives you one LinkedIn. And even for resumes, like the conventional wisdom back in the day was you should tailor your resume for the job you're applying to. LinkedIn doesn't let you do that. So what I often see happen is that people use LinkedIn and they make it like a data dump of information about them, and they put in all the keywords, because a lot of recruiters use Boolean search. So they're thinking like, oh, I want to find someone who has like, business operations experience or who has done billing and payroll before, for example, and they'll just put in those search terms. And if your role happens to have that name in it, or if your description has that name, great. But sometimes companies will put things under like, okay, this is, the finance department. So someone might just say, I'm a finance lead, even if they did do, for example, billing and payroll as part of it. If they don't list it there, then they can't be found. So I think that, just as Google's algorithm is constantly changing in terms of SEO, LinkedIn is also updating those things. But it is right now, you don't get penalized for having more information in there, at least under your relevant roles, so that you can be more easily found. If you're applying for a specific job, or again, if you're reaching out to someone who's helping you get a referral to a hiring manager, it might be beneficial to call out the specific things in your background that are relevant to the job. So it can be as simple as looking at what the job description says and almost like mirroring or parroting back or paraphrasing certain things that they say about what you've done. And sometimes, again, if you've been in a bigger company, people might not know exactly what this title means. So you need to sort of reduce the friction in their mind and let them know what it is that you did so that you can provide context. And finally, for smaller companies in particular, they might not even have a job description written out, or the best roles are ones where, the hiring manager knows they have this need, but they haven't even figured out what to call it, how to level it, et cetera. Those are some of the most exciting opportunities. Those are ones where you can really demonstrate leadership and take a lot of ownership in that. Then a lot of it is about kind of doing your research on the company, anticipating what it is that they might be struggling with, asking, of course, the hiring manager, engaging in a conversation about what some of their greatest challenges are, and presenting yourself in a way in which you can couple your previous experiences and having worked on something similar, but also how you could naturally just slot in and help them alleviate some of those challenges. And one area which I think is particularly great for that is, for example, marketing, because with marketing, you can literally see how companies are presenting themselves, maybe what their struggles are. You might not know exactly what their web traffic is, but actually a lot of this data is also public. You can see how they rank on certain sites and things like that. So even being able to demonstrate that you really understand them, and people love hearing people talk about them. I mean, they love talking about themselves, number one, but number two, they also love it when other people talk about them. So if you're able to talk about their company, which is something they care a lot about, in a way that demonstrates how you can take care of it and help it get to the next level, then that's actually very attractive for a lot of employers.
And Joyce, can you talk about the actual process of getting onto the Alariss database for go-to-market executives here? I know there's some people who may not be in your sweet spot, but can you talk more about how do people get onboarded and what is the process like to be working with Alariss?
Sure. So for us, we try to make it as frictionless as possible, which is why our sign up is really simple. We used to have a much longer one, and then we realized, again, we can analyze website traffic. We realized we had a lot of drop off. So we make it really simple. Your LinkedIn, your comp expectation. Again, it doesn't have to be what you're currently earning. It's just what you hope to have. And then your name or your email, sorry. And so with that, like, again, we actually can scrape all the data from LinkedIn that you already have and upload it to the database. And then we have our, algorithms that will match to different openings and roles. But in general, if people demonstrate that they're open-minded and interested, what we like to do, because many of the companies we work with are companies that are just entering the US or new markets for the first time. They need someone who's like basically a general manager, and sometimes they don't even know what they need. So that person ideally has, a little bit of experience in all sorts of things, but maybe is spiky in one thing that they really need, whether it's B2B sales or growth marketing, but generally can wear a lot of hats and probably be more like a sounding board and advisor. That's the unique dynamic that we try to go for. And this is why it's cross-border is very unique, because the chances are, if it's a domestic company, they know exactly what they need and they have a more robust recruiting operation. But if it's an overseas company or it's a startup that's kind of expanding for the first time and trying to get its sea legs, then they need a lot of guidance and help. So another strategy that we see, not just through our platform, but in general, is that you can start off as kind of a fractional C-level person, whether it's a chief revenue officer, chief marketing officer, and just fractionally help a couple of companies or just even one company. And if it goes well, and if they get more, budget, and feel more comfort, then they can hire someone full time if that's what you're looking for. But we've also seen some people on our platform have so much fun from being fractional that they decide they actually don't want to be full time with anyone. They'd rather split their time with multiple companies.
Great. And when people continue on a fractional journey versus not, what are the main reasons, what they enjoy versus not enjoy? How should someone evaluate whether to explore this as their next phase of their career?
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear from some of you because I'm sure many of you have experiences with this. I think it comes down to personal preference and personal circumstance. If someone is a primary breadwinner for the family and they live in an expensive place, I see that they are more drawn to W-2 that provides full insurance and benefits, and that can also cover family, for example. Um, for those who are fractional, oftentimes it's because they like the flexibility, the intellectual, like they like code switching or context switching. They actually don't want to work on just one tiny little feature or one tiny little piece for like, 50 hours a week and every single day. They like to context switch. They also see the disproportionate upside. And then for many of them, actually, their combined salary is higher than if they were just a W-2 at one place. But it does take a lot more mental load because you have to, again, context switch. Sometimes some client might drop off, and then for an interim, your combined salary is less because you're, missing a chunk of the income you had before. And then some people like to travel. Like it's not uncommon for people on our platform to work remotely. We were definitely a pandemic fueled company that became very popular when people were all about remote work. And now with return to office, a lot of people said, "Oh man, it's a bummer." But actually, I'd rather do remote. And so that's another reason a lot of them end up doing fractional because fractional roles are very remote friendly, whereas W-2 roles are in the US at least are increasingly requiring return to office.
Thank you. And the last question is, how can this community be useful for you, Joyce?
Well, I think that, I mean, I can't emphasize enough how excited people on our platform would be for the chance to potentially work with someone who's a Google alum. I think the biggest problem is that they probably don't have the budget to afford you. So that's another reason we sometimes encourage them to think about fractional, because as we point out, having 1/4 of the time of a really amazing person is worth more than, paying 100% of the time of someone who doesn't have experience. And sometimes companies need to get over that thought of like, how can I go for the cheapest option possible? They need to think more critically about how can I achieve the objectives that I want and how can I get experienced, trustworthy people who can get me there.
Yep. Thank you, Joyce. We're going to stop this recording and have more open Q&A right after this. But before that, Joyce, how can anyone who's watching this reach out to you in the future?
Sure. Well, feel free to email me at joyce@alariss.com or to sign up on sign up on our website. So I'll put in my personal email, also my LinkedIn, and our website is candidate like alariss.com/candidates for
Great.
signing up as a candidate.
So it's just Joyce, Joyce at alariss.com. So thanks for joining and watching this recording, everyone. Come join us for our next session.